in the top 10 at the start of the offseason are off the market, but as we said, still some guys left out there looking for new deals. In your mind, who are some of the winners already this offseason?
Oh, well, you got to point directly to the Rockets. First of all, they get Kevin Durant for, a minimal, really kind of risk assessment here. Like, they give up Jalen Green. They weren't really sure they were rocking with that contract that they gave him, although that could end up being a steal if he plays well for Phoenix. And then they get off Dillon Brooks, but they bring in Kevin Durant, Clint Capella, and they give themselves a lot of center depth. I think the Rockets are actually setting themselves up for another trade mid-season because they're armed with 3 centers. They've got matching salary. They've still got young players that they could deal. So they could do even more. But even if they stay as is, they keep their elite defense. They keep Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, Fred VanVleet, keep all of that in place and add Kevin Durant to an offense that really was the only hole there. The Hawks, I would go to next. The Hawks have had a phenomenal offseason. They had Kristaps Porzingis, really one of the big free agent prizes in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who I expected to go to Detroit, had been heavily rumored there. He's one of the prizes. Now, that says a little bit about how thin this class was. We're certainly not talking about a superstar, but in terms of outfitting Trae Young with an optimal defensive lineup around him, they can put out a lineup now with a Kongwu at center, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, last year's #1 overall pick, Zachary Rissache, the Defensive Player of the Year runner-up, Dyson Daniels. They have now outfitted Trae Young. If he can't do it with this surrounding, with this kind of perimeter insulation, with this kind of backline protection with the Kongwu and Porzingis at the rim, then we might have to start questioning not just Trae Young, but this total archetype of player, of a point guard who's a brilliant offensive player, brilliant creator, but is so limited defensively that even insulated as the Hawks have done, it's too much of a detriment. So really a good case study happening in Atlanta this year. I would go through Denver, phenomenal. Added to their bench, makes an unbelievable trade for Michael Porter Jr. This is a guy that they've really, I think, kind of quietly been trying to get off for a while now, but just had too big of a contract. In today's apron world, it's too punitive to have your third best player making over $200 million not actually be a star. You can't outfit the roster with enough depth. They get off him and get Cam Johnson, a better player, and then also give themselves the ability to add some depth with Bruce Brown. We'll see what happens with Jonas Valanciunas, but they have really given themselves the depth that they need to contend with Nikola Jokic. So those are 3 that I would point to. I think the Grizzlies did very well. But a lot of teams, those 3-4 teams have had really, really good off seasons.
Brad, let me ask you a question quickly here on Houston, the trade of Cam Whitmore to the Wizards on Saturday. What do you make of that move? Just simply not enough minutes and shots to go around for a young, talented guy.
You're exactly right there. I thought they might, put Whitmore in a little bit of a bigger package. But again, I do think Houston is kind of angling for another move down the line with this center depth, and so you put those second-round picks into another package. But you're right, just not enough minutes. I mean, last year's #3 overall pick, Reed Shepherd, couldn't even crack the lineup. So maybe without Green, they get him a few more minutes this year. But it's very tough to develop. We're seeing a case play out right now in Golden State, where you got a team that's been ready to win and has been in compete for a championship mode for a while. And albeit their guys have gotten a little bit more time than Whitmore and Shepherd did last year, relatively speaking, we're seeing a guy in Jonathan Kuminga who might be an all-star, and nobody knows what he's worth because he has just not been able to tap into a role that's been able to show exactly how good he's been for a team that is prioritizing winning now. And now that Houston is prioritizing the same thing, it's just a situation where you're right, Cam Whitmore, really talented scorer, great athlete, in a Wizards situation where he's not going to be bound by the restrictions that come with a team that's trying to win and is going to sit him down for every mistake that he makes and is going to let him go through that learning curve. It could be a very good move for him individually as well.
All right, if we have winners on July 6th, we've got to have some losers. What teams make your list in that category?
Oh, man, this is a big fat Bucks blinking sign. I mean, this is... We're let's just roll one topic right into the next. The Bucks, the Lakers. Let's start with the Lakers. Okay, the Lakers have not done well this offseason. They lose Dorian Finney-Smith. They bring it, it's funny. It speaks to the thinness of this class that we're out here talking. It's like a DeAndre Ayton sweepstakes. DeAndre Ayton, give me a break. I mean, the guy is a double-double guy. He does have talent. He was one of the better pick-and-roll finishers when he was playing with Chris Paul in Phoenix. Didn't have the same kind of spacing or point guard play in Portland, so maybe you dismissed some of that. But again, put all this in perspective. We're talking about DeAndre Ayton. And then I bet you if you went and you asked half the NBA watching viewership, if they know who Jake LaRavia is, you'd get about 50 different answers. So, he's a good player, makes solid plays, a little bit of a replacement for Dorian Finney-Smith. But the Lakers are making a clear statement here that they're planning for 2026 and 27, which we can get into. I would poke some holes in that plan. But in terms of through the prism of this season, I don't think the Lakers have done that well. To add DeAndre Ayton, yeah, you filled your center position, I guess, a little bit. So nothing to write home about. But the Bucks, I mean, where do we start with Milwaukee? They stretch. There's never been anything like this in NBA history. Nobody has ever waived and stretched a contract of this magnitude. Damian Lillard, $113 million over the next 5 years. They're going to pay him $22.5 million every year for the next 5 years. He could go to Turks and Caicos and be drinking beach drinks for the next 5 years, not touch a basketball, not even put any shoes on, and he's going to get $22.5 million a year from the Bucks. He needs to get in touch with Bobby Bonilla and see, how do I spend this money that I'm doing nothing to work for? One of the great setups for Damian Lillard. This guy is set up, can sign anywhere for a veteran minimum, but the Bucks do this. They have done a series of increasingly desperate moves, and you got to give them some credit for trying to do that, to outfit Giannis and keep him in a small market. They make the trade for Jrue Holiday. It costs them dearly, but it has a payback. They win the title. Then they get a little bit more desperate when the Giannis rumblings start. He might leave again. We don't have a lot of options. We spent all of our draft picks on Jrue. Let's go get Damian Lillard. Now, that was a little bit desperate, but it's still Damian Lillard. You take your shot. It ended up not working. They dismissed too much defense getting rid of Holiday. They brought in an offense that didn't exactly click between Lillard and Giannis. So then they get a little bit more desperate, and, man, we better fire our coach and let's bring in Doc Rivers. Now, that's when it started getting really dire, when you think Doc Rivers is just going to flip around a team with the same roster. And now they have just gone full-on delusional, paying Damian Lillard $113 million over the next 5 years. We have been talking on this segment about the punitive aspect of the new aprons in the CBA. They're now working from a $22.5 million hole every year before they even start on their cap sheet, to say nothing of all the draft picks that they've gotten rid of. They have no young talent that anybody wants, all for Miles Turner, which, no disrespect to Miles Turner, he was a #1 guy on my free agency list. But again, that speaks to the thinness of the class. Miles Turner is a little bit better than Brook Lopez. All right, this is a guy that's been on the trade block for a half decade in Indiana. I know we all have recency bias. We just watched his Pacers make a great run to Game 7 of the NBA Finals, and he played well, played big minutes, didn't shoot all that well. He wasn't overwhelming, but clearly a playoff rotational player, starting center, fine. But if you're going to stretch Damian Lillard $113 million and put yourself behind that kind of 8-ball from an apron perspective for the next half decade, you better be getting Jokic. You're getting Miles Turner, a little bit of an upgrade from Brook Lopez, and Lillard's gone. So now you're two-man show. Your point guard is Kevin Porter. You re-signed Gary Trent. It's so dire. I think that again, give them credit that they have pulled all the stops to try to keep Giannis happy. But this was one too many. They should have conceded to trading Giannis. It's over. They got their championship. Let's go get a huge package for him and set up our next era. They went one step too far here, and they're going to be feeling the ramifications of this step for the next half decade plus.
Okay, so my next question was going to be, what do the Bucks need to do to keep Giannis? But, Brad, it sounds like maybe it's a franchise that should be – I've always said I don't want to be the GM who trades away a generational talent. But for the betterment of a franchise, maybe you need to take that risk. Is that what you're saying here? They're like, look, Milwaukee's better off not just trying to keep Giannis happy, but trying to find a way to win after him, without him.
Yeah, anybody who plays the stock market or the NBA market is really the same. Like, you need to be ahead of things. You have to. If you keep pressing your bet on the craps table, like, eventually somebody's crapping out. So you've got to know when to, and it's hard to judge when's the right time. When are you ahead of it? But yeah, I think the Bucks should have seen that they won their pot with the championship, and they were pressing their bet a little too far, and they should have got out of the game and cashed in a lot of chips for Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, having said that, the fact that they didn't, and they already took this step, now it's like, well, hell, we're already drowning. We may as well kind of keep, throwing some more water on us. So I think now that you're in, you're already, whether you give up Giannis now or not, and I still don't think it would be the worst move. I still would probably say, man, look to trade Giannis. But think about the optics of this. When they go into this hole for Damian Lillard, they do all this for Miles Turner, all under the flag of keeping Giannis happy. And then they have to trade Giannis anyway. Well, then, hell, give me back the Lillard money. Let me use him as an asset, get even more for him in a trade. Now they can't even trade him. So I do think there's a possibility that now that they are this deep in, that they go even further. Like, to hell with it. And let's go get Anthony Simons from Boston, who might be in the mode of trying to trim salary. We know they're in a gap year. Anthony Simons can somewhat replicate Damian Lillard. And now, at least on paper, you can say you might have a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. At least, maybe then the Miles Turner, if we add more to it, can at least plausibly make an impact. I mean, right now you're still like a 6 seed in the JV conference. So I think that actually, now that they've gone this far in, it's like, what's the difference? And I'm kind of watching the Anthony Simons situation. There have been rumors that Boston would be willing to reflip him. They're trying to trim salary. They're kind of conceding to their own gap year. And, look, it's the Eastern Conference. The Bucks might be able to convince themselves. Maybe more importantly, Giannis can convince himself and say, I want to stay with Simons and Turner and Giannis. They just watched the Pacers do it with an offense-first point guard and center rim protection in Turner, and you've got Giannis. So I think there's a chance they go even further. I wouldn't do it. I think they should have cashed in their bet a long time ago, but they didn't. And now that they're in this deep of water, I think there's a chance that they actually go further.
Brad Botkin always brings it here.